Dion Fortune. Remember, this is not to cause fear mongering. This is to overcome the fear of the unknown, to overcome the fear of things unseen, to realize that you are powerful and God gave you everything you need. And there is no power outside of yourself that can harm you unless you give it permission to. Now, let us continue with chapter 11. We have seen in a previous chapter that nervous and mental disorder can stimulate a psychic attack, especially if the subject is familiar with the terminology of occultism. We must also consider the part played by psychic attack in nervous and mental disorders. But before we can embark upon this section of our studies, we must first give an explanation of the nature of nervous and mental disturbances and the distinction between them. We will not go into academic considerations, for these pages are not written for the orthodox professional psychologist who has an abundance of textbooks at his disposal, but for the person whose interest is primarily in occult matters and who comes to the study of the subject unequipped with the technicalities of psychology and psychophysiology. Two sciences, two sciences of which at least a working knowledge is exceedingly necessary in the pursuit of practical occultism. In the course of in the course of an incarnation, the mind is built up on the foundation of the traits of the higher self or individuality, which is the immortal soul that develops in the course of an evolution. The mind, therefore, is part of the personality, the unit of incarnation, commencing at birth and dissolving at death, its essence being absorbed by the individuality which evolves thereby. The mind is essentially the organ of adaptation to the environment, and it is when the adaptation fails that neurotic and hysterical troubles begin. Each living creature is the channel for a current of life force, which proceeds from the Logos, the creator of this universe. This current is divided into three main channels represented to us as the three great natural instincts: self-preservation, self-preservation, reproduction, and the social instinct. These are the mainsprings of our lives. The pressure of life itself is behind them, and if they are thwarted beyond their power of compensation, they are like streams whose channels are blocked, and which in consequence overflow and make a morass of the adjacent land. Emotion is the subjective aspect of an instinct. That is to say, when an instinct is at work, we feel emotion. Every emotion we feel can be referred to one or other of the instincts. Our resentment is a slur upon our dignity, has its roots in the instinct of self preservation. Our love of art has its roots in the instinct of love, beauty, and creative expression, which, upon its lowest arc, is called sex. Each of these instincts has its high spiritual aspect and its elemental physical aspect. And transmutation from one plane to another takes place freely. So that unless we understand the significance of these manifestations, we shall be misled. And their understanding is the key to the science of life. If one of these if one of these great instincts is so thwarted that all attempts at compensation break down, or if the temperament is so inelastic and unaccommodating that it will not modify its demands, the ego makes a final desperate attempt at adjustment which goes outside the limits within which harmonious relations with the environment can be maintained. Communications with the environment break down, and the mind has, in parts at least, quitted the sphere of reality for the sphere of imagination. The sense of fixed values is lost, and things assume a symbolic importance. This breakdown may be partial, relating to certain aspects of the life only, or it may be total. In hysteria, the dammed up forces of life remain in the channel, but spurt with concentrated force through any sluice that may be open to them. Consequently, instead of the river below the obstruction being a smooth flowing body of water, it descends in rapids and whirlpools, difficult and dangerous to navigate, so that the bark of life makes shipwreck therein. The surrounding country, too, is reduced to a morass, neither land nor water. In other words, the temperament becomes tempestuous and unduly emotional, and the non emotional factors of the mind, such as judgment and self control, are demoralized. Such a temperament must, of necessity, be perpetually in difficulties with life, and periodically the repressed emotions boil over in fits of screaming, crying, and convulsive muscular movements, which act as safety valves and relieve the pressure temporarily. The neurotic differs from the hysteric in certain well marked ways, which need to be carefully borne in mind, as they are very important from the practical standpoint. The troubles of the neurotic start in the same way as those of the hysteric, being due to repressed emotion and failure to adapt to environment. But in his case, the life forces set to work cut fresh channels for themselves that shall circumvent the obstacle which blocks their path. Consequently, we get what the psychologists call displacement of emotion. Some comparatively innocuous matter becomes the object of an outpouring of emotion which in no way concerns it, for it has been made a substitute for something else. It is this curious underground tracking of emotion in the mind which causes so much trouble. For the sufferer is not insane, and yet certain sections of his values and reactions to life are perverted. He is an extremely tricky person to deal with because he is given to unexpected and quite irrational loves and hates and fears and acts accordingly. Similar conditions prevail in the organic insanities. The psychological results are the same. But because the origin is physical, not mental, they are but little amenable to psychotherapy. Certain things can be done to alleviate them. However, even if they are not entirely curable, therefore, let us consider them from both the psychophysical and occult standpoints. The body is the vehicle of the mind. If the vehicle be faulty, the mind cannot express itself accurately. Its reactions will be distorted. Orthodox science says that the brain is the organ of the mind, but esoteric science says the brain is the organ of perception and sense impressions and coordination of efferent impulses. It is the telephone exchange of the nervous system. It is only one of the points where mind touches body. The others being the ductless glands of the endocrine system, the pineal, pituitary, thyroid, adrenals, thymus, and gonads, to which may be added the solar plexus and sacral plexus. The student of tantric physiology will be very dull if he has not observed that the chakras coincide in their physical locations with the endocrine organs. Now the endocrines have for their task the maintenance of the chemical composition of the blood. They pour into their secretions called hormones in certain balanced proportions. If the balance is in any way upset, either by an overplus of one secretion or a shortage of another, profound changes in metabolism take place. The whole of the life processes are regulated by the endocrines and can be sped up or slowed down in their different aspects as the balance of the endocrines alter. This endocrine balance is known by physiologists to be intimately associated with emotional states, and especially with the alertness or stolidity of the temperament. Psychologists do not sufficiently appreciate the importance of the recent work of the endocrines, but occultists have a knowledge of this aspect of psychophysiology as part of their traditional teaching. The breathing exercises of the yoga system are based upon this knowledge and are exceedingly potent, as are all occult practices which are brought through correctly to the physical plane. In fact, we may say that no occult process is really potent, nor can it be said to have completed its circuit unless it has its points of contact with dense matter, a point which many occultists leave out of their calculations. Occultism, though primarily a mental process, is not purely mental. It is both spiritual and material. In the great majority of cases of insanity, organic brain changes cannot be demonstrated. But alienists are more and more coming to recognize that they may look for the clues of Hecate in the blood. Its chemical composition may depart from normal, whether owing to a change in the hormone balance or to the byproducts of disease. This change in the blood chemistry is immediately followed by a charge in the emotional tone. It may become over emotional or depressed, apathetic or irritable. The ancients described these conditions admirably as the four humors: the sanguine, the bilious, the lymphatic, and the choleric. It has been abundantly demonstrated by physiologists that emotional states affect the chemical composition of the blood. It is gradually being realized that these changes are brought about through the mediation of the ductless glands, which may be called the emotional brain, just as the gray matter within the skull may be called the sensory motor brain. It follows, therefore, that if through some interference with their functioning, the glands produce a blood composition corresponding to that produced by them when a particular emotional state is given its special stimulus, the individual will experience the physical sensations associated with the corresponding emotional state. His mind will proceed to adjust to these conditions by accounting for them through the imagination as best it may. So that if there is a state of the blood characteristic of the condition of fear, fear images will arise in the mind. It is upon this basis that the organic insanities produce their characteristic mental states. Whether the emotional state be due to a mental cause or a physical cause, the result is the same for the patient. Organic insanities are distinguished from functional ones solely by their origin, and organic insanity tends to depart further from the normal than a functional nervous disorder, because in the latter, a considerable degree of compensation takes place. For the patient can, to a great extent, pull himself together and keep himself from going to disastrous extremes. This is not the case with an organic insanity, which proceeds to his logical conclusion. It is for this reason that a neurotic, although he may suffer severely, seldom has a complete breakdown unless he is sure of the necessities of life. The self-preservation instinct keeps him on his feet. Having considered the physical and subjective basis of mental disturbances, we are now in a position to assess accurately the part played by the unseen. What happens when a neurotic takes up occultism? We can best answer this question by considering what happens when a normal person takes up occultism. He learns for the first time of the existence of the invisible worlds and begins to think about them. Immediately, he does this. He comes into touch with them. At first, he may not be able to perceive them consciously. Nevertheless, he is feeling them subconsciously, and they are affecting him. His life shows this to the close observer in 1,000 ways. There are great forces moving like currents in the unseen, and we are drawn into these according to our temperamental affinity for them. The violent personality is drawn to the current of Mars, the emotional, suggestible one into the spirit of Luna. Let me highlight this for myself. The influences of these spirits play upon them. Now the occultist working under a proper system, knowing that he has got to meet these forces sooner or later, picks them up one by one, voluntarily and by means of the appropriate rituals and synthesis then within and synthesizes them within his own nature. He knows too that each aspect has its obverse. The Virgin Mary is reflected in Lilith. The older faith knew this, but popular Christianity, which has no roots in tradition, has forgotten it. Opposites. See, Virgin Mary, Lilith, dark, light, up, down, left, right, hot, cold, day, night. Protestant Christianity threw away its occult aspect at the Reformation. All the pagan pantheons have gross aspects of divinities as well as ethereal ones. We need to search the refuse heap of history for the lost parts of our own tradition if our faith is to be complete. And the most profitable line of search is in the Kabbalah and in the Gnostic literature. The literature of the Gnosis has been largely destroyed by systematic persecution, but in the Kabbalah, there is still left for us a complete system. The Jewish being strictly monotheistic, mono, monotheistic. The Jews being strictly monotheistic did not speak of gods, but they recognized a hierarchy of angels and archangels, which is the equivalent of the pagan pantheons. It is through these ethereal messengers that the All-Father formed the world. Let us consider one more of the Kabbalistic doctrine of the clip-off. So if you study in the Kabbalah, you should have this book with you as a reference point. You know what I'm saying? But let me finish what I was saying. Let us consider once more the Kabbalistic doctrine of the clip-off, for it has an intimate bearing upon the problem of insanity. The doctrine of the 10 holy Sephiroth, arranged in a correct pattern to form the tree of life, is invaluable in enabling us to conceive the invisible. The first Sephiroth is concentrated on the unmanifest, the point within the circle. Let me highlight that. This emanates the second, which in its turn emanates the third, and soon as one has emanated another, these two are said to be equilibrated. Equilibrated. But when emanation is in process, there is a period of unbalanced force. This, as it were, goes off by itself in the cosmos and establishes a sphere of its own, unconnected with the cosmic system. Consequently, each sphere of the cosmos has its counterpart in chaos. In miniature, it is true, but nevertheless potent and functional. Each sphere, in the course of its evolution, builds up an oversoul, which is called by different names in different systems. In the Kabbalic system, we call them the archangels, the spirits before the throne. The spirit of the sun is represented by Raphael, the spirit of the moon by Gabriel. The obverse Sephiroth, or clip-off, build up in exactly the same way. In the habitations of hell, these two are known as the disputers and the obscene ones, whose names sufficiently indicate their characters. The spirit of the sun is also the point of manifestation of the Messiah or Savior upon earth. The Prince of Peace has its obverse in the disputers, who that has had the vision beautiful does not know the reaction that follows it, and the need of wisdom, self-control, and patience to deal with the forces that are released not only in the soul, but also in the environment. It is for this reason that periods of purgation and discipline precede all revelations. We must keep the visual. We must keep the vigil before we can sit at the feast. Consciousness, released from the spirit of earth, rises straight upwards to the spirit of the moon. This, that's the Malkuth, and what's that upon the Malkuth? How did I not know this? Yeah, I know what I'm talking about. I think I still got my chart. I got to put up though, but consciousness released from the spirit of earth rises straight upwards to the spirit of the moon. I'm gonna feel real silly when I look at this chart. I'm like, well, duh. This is the negative, feminine, receptive, psychic spirit, the moon. Negative, not in the bad way, just in the polarity way. From thence, it Negative means feminine. Positive means masculine. Not good or evil. It's just a polarity of energy, a polarization of two poles making themselves whole on opposite ends, but together they are one. From thence, it passes onward to the spirit of the sun, which is funny because, like I said, together they are one. So masculine and feminine is one. It's not separate. We as humans tend to think, oh, men and women are different. We not. We the same. We just two extremes of the same thing. If you even just sit back and observe the physical bodies of men and women, they aren't that different. If you look at the sexual organs, they ain't different. One's in, one's out. Women have breasts, men have chest. Unless you gain an extra amount of weight, then you got breasts too as a man. But my point is, it's the same. We got nipples as men. Women got nipples as women. We not different. We just think we are because for many reasons, propaganda, for example, but for many reasons, they cause separation and division, which is something we gonna move past as these years go by and our consciousness continue to grow. From thence, it passes. Let me go back to what I was saying. Consciousness, released from the spirit of earth, rises straight upwards to the spirit of the moon. This is the negative feminine receptive psychic spirit. From thence, it passes onwards to the spirit of the sun. This is the positive masculine spirit of the higher consciousness. The vision of the seer as distinguished from the psychic. Upon either hand, the path is flanked by the spirits of medic wisdom and elemental beauty. These spirits, which have to do with the grades of initiation, need not concern us in the present pages. We shall have only to do with the spirit of the moon, Luna, the mistress of the lunatic. Now, Luna was represented by the ancients under diverse forms as Diana, the Chas huntress, symbol of sublimation, and Hecate, patroness of witchcraft and childbirth. We have already noted that the clip off of the spirit of Luna are called the obscene ones. Hence, it is that when the unstable soul advances by the path of Saturn that bridges the astral and enters the spirit of Luna, he touches her Hecate aspect and finds himself in rapport with the obscene ones, whose chief is Lilith, she who giveth lustful dreams. Need we then wonder that Freud finds the dreams of the neurotic filled with sexual images in their most perverted and debased forms? The rabbis knew their psychology just as well as he does. As has already been noted, the neurotic is very often psychic, and the psychic is very often neurotic. What we may expect to happen to the soul that has taken initiation in that past life retains subconsciously the psychic development thus conferred and finds itself incarnated in a neurotic personality in this life. He will come under the dark dominion of the moon, and Lilith will be his mistress. Through the ill-fitting doors of the neurotic temperament, the forces of the abyss find ingress. The disassociated complexes of the microcosm are reinforced by the disassociated complex of the macrocosm. For that it for that is precisely what the clip-off are. Occultists and their ignorant admirers, the superstitious, have always held that insanity had to do with demonic possession. Modern medicine disputes this and declares the various manifestation of the diseased minds to be entirely to subjective psychological processes. Some people still think it's demonic, but you get the point. At present, these two schools of thought are like two armed camps. Each is too sure of his own ground to be willing to give the other a hearing. But you get the point, because now if somebody is diagnosed as schizophrenic, we don't assume that they're demonically possessed. Even though some people still believe that, and some people are on the edge of between the two. They just don't know what to think. They like, I don't know what to think about this type of person because they just coming off as crazy. I don't know if they think they possess or if they just need um, a mental help. But the point is, we moving beyond that. We have moved beyond just us automatically saying, "Oh, that's the devil," right? And we're gonna move even further, even further, as our consciousness grows and expands. But like I was saying, at present, these two schools of thought are like two armed camps drawn up for battle and shaking their weapons at each other. Each is too sure of his own ground to be willing to give the other a hearing, just like religion. It is my belief that a common ground can be found for the meeting of these two opposing viewpoints. Psychology demonstrates the mechanism of the mind and can explain the mental processes whereby the ideas of the deranged assume their ultimate form. It can show the connection between these ideas and the dreams of the normal mentality. What it cannot explain is the fundamental difference between the subjective states and the normal waking consciousness. It is here that the occultist can tell the psychologist something that is worth his while to hear, for he can show how these visions can be produced experimentally and at will by means of ceremonial magic. And still more important, the occultist can show him how these visions can be dispersed in the psychic faculties, closed down and sealed. This brings us to the practical part of our considerations. How far can the methods of ritual magic be applied to the relief of mental dis-ease? They are undoubtedly palliative, but they will not produce a permanent cure unless the origin of the disturbed mental condition is found and cleared up, which is why we do subconscious healing work, because that is the origin. What is the origin? What made that person tick in the first place? If you can find that out, you can help that person heal themselves and they will never ever turn up that way again. That will never show up again. But if you give them uh, medication or you give them some type of psychic healing, it's just temporarily. It's just temporary. You know, it's just temporary. Our goal is to get rid of it forever. Unless this be done as fast as we disperse the phantoms, they will reform because the mental state of the patient is invoking them. Under such circumstances, no magic circle can be kept intact. As fast as we break the rapport with the abyss, the patient renews it. But such conditions constitute a vicious circle. The clipotic forces, the clipotic forces, which with a contact have been established, will actively develop it and will hold on to the victim when attempts are made to dislodge them. In this rationalistic age, we are apt to forget that there is such a thing as organized and intelligent evil. If the cycle, if the physical causes of this disturbance have been cleared up, the septic focus eradicated, or the tumor pressing upon the ductless gland excised, and still the mentality does not return to normal, an exorcism will often produce immediate and marked results. In the case of the neurotic, whose trouble is entirely in the spirit of the mind, an exorcism is of enormous value as a preliminary to the appropriate psychotherapeutic treatment because it clears the ground and prevents reinfection, giving the patient a chance to make a fresh start. It is possible for the kleptotic demons to gain so powerful a hypnotic influence over a victim that he is powerless to break it by any effort of his own will. Nor can the orthodox type of psychotherapy touch the root of the trouble. The exorcism may have to be repeated 2 or 3 times in the course of the treatment because the reports may be renewed after they have been broken. But once the patient's complexes have been cleared up, they will not return. In any case, an exorcism produces marked temporary benefit. During the lull, the patient gets a chance to pull himself together and the evil influences are undermined. A courageous patient who is cooperating intelligently will seldom have to be exercised more than 3 times, provided material conditions are favorable. I have seen cases cleared by a single exorcism and remaining well indefinitely so long as the patient obeyed instructions and had nothing whatever to do with the unseen. Neither reading books upon occultism nor associating with people who are interested in such subjects. And I have also seen the abyss reestablish its influence when the patient disobeyed instructions and reawakened the old vibrations. We need to realize that the human consciousness is not a closed vessel, but like the body, has a continual intake and output. The cosmic forces are circulating through it all the time, like seawater through a living sponge. Whatever emotional state may arise within us is reinforced from outside. The subjective self only has the kindling. The cosmos supply the fuel. Once the fire is started, the cosmic forces of the appropriate type will stoke it. Just as the devout Catholic is inspired by the influence of his patron saint invoked by prayer, so the neurotic is hag-ridden by his obsessive demon, invoked by the morbid broodings of the disassociated subconsciousness. The occultist maintains that the generalized principle of evil has its intelligent channels, just as the organized principle of good has its ministering spirits. Any observer who considers the phenomena of mental disturbances will find much to support this hypothesis. The question of obsession is an exceedingly important one. The word is used very freely in occult circles and is held to mean the withdrawal of a soul from its body and its replacement by another soul. But I doubt whether this is a true representation of what happens. It has always appeared to me that in obsession, we have not got the actual replacement of one soul by another, but the complete domination of one soul by another. Even mentally, it is hypnotic domination, and we can explain it in terms of the known psychology of hypnosis, the hypnotist in case being the astral entity. So what she's saying is she took it even farther. I'm saying mentally, like even though that could be an astral entity, could be considered a mental influence as well. But I get what in the astral is can be hypnotized at somebody. But if you know me and what I believe, I don't believe in stuff like that. Not saying that it doesn't happen. I'm saying if it happens to you, you have the power to cancel it out. But if you don't know that, then you can be influenced by not just an astral entity, but by human beings as well. There is an operation in magic known as assuming the God form. There we go. There we go. That's what I'm talking about. There is an operation in magic known as assuming the God form, in which the operator identifies himself in imagination with the God and so become a channel for its power. It is one of the special modes of Egyptian magic wherein the priests always wore a mask to represent the animal head symbolically attributed to the god he represented. This imaginative identification is a method well known in occultism and is often employed in order to enter into the inner life of a plant or a crystal as a mental exercise. A mental exercise. We always want to exercise our bodies, but we mentally exercise as well. The effects of it are very marked and very peculiar. I am inclined to think that it is this method combined with hypnosis which is used by the obsessing entity, which first identifies itself with its victim and then superimposes its own personality upon his, thus obtaining a vehicle of manifestation. I am also of the opinion, however, that it is only in certain abnormal states, whether induced by dis-ease of mind or body, or by some of the more drastic operations of black magic, that this imposition can take place. So she's saying this is what the astral entity would be doing to possess someone. But what I'm saying is you can do that to not be possessed. Not just by ghosts and spirits, but by your friends and your family and your co-workers in the TV and the newspaper as well. The media as well. That's what I'm saying. You don't have to allow nobody to have any power over you, whether it be a physical being or a non-physical being. I don't care. And then we could quote the Bible scripture. What does it say? I have given you dominion over all things. I have given you dominion over all things. So you got the power. The kingdom of heaven is within you. You got the power. You don't have to be afraid of nothing or nobody. Peace and love. Have a nice day. I'll see y'all next time.